My name is Caroline Mercer. I'm 29 years old, and this is the story of how my mother told me to go live in the streets after I moved back home to help my dying father. Then went online and bragged that my sister had stepped up and done what her useless daughter never could. What she didn't know was that I had already paid nearly $50,000 toward my father's care. What she also didn't know was that I keep records when people lie. If you've never grown up as the designated disappointment in your own family, let me explain something. It doesn't matter what you actually accomplish. Not really. Once someone decides who you are to them, facts stop mattering. You can build a business, pay your own bills, save someone's life, hold everything together with both hands while everyone else stands around posing for sympathy. And still, in their version of the story, you're the unstable one, the lazy one, the selfish one, the problem. That was me in my mother's eyes. Always had been. My younger years were full of little lessons dressed up as family dynamics. My sister Bridget was the golden child, responsible, reliable, photogenic, easy to praise in public. I was the one my mother spoke about with a sigh already loaded in her throat, as if I'd exhausted her before I even opened my mouth. Didn't matter that Bridget and I lived completely different lives. Didn't matter that I had built something real. Didn't matter that I hadn't asked them for anything since I was 22. In our house, Bridget was sacrifice. I was inconvenience. My father was the only person who ever made that feel less absolute. He worked 40 years as a machinist, the kind of man who came home with metal dust in the creases of his hands and tiny silver shavings stuck to the cuffs of his socks. He didn't understand the kind of work I did. Not really. The first time I tried explaining cybersecurity consulting to him, he stared at me for a few seconds, nodded once, and said, "Sounds important, sweetheart." That was enough. He didn't need to understand my world to respect it. He trusted me without needing a performance. My mother was different. To her, anything that didn't look like clocking in under fluorescent lights for somebody else barely counted as work. I ran a cybersecurity company, remote consulting, penetration testing, risk audits for financial institutions, steady clients, real contracts, actual revenue. But if you listened to my mother describe me, you'd think I spent my days in pajama pants playing video games in a dark room while pretending to be employed. Bridget, meanwhile, was a dental hygienist. My mother loved that. It was visible, easy to explain, easy to brag about to church friends and women from Facebook groups who treated ordinary family dysfunction like competitive suffering. "Bridget is so independent," she'd post. "Thank God one of my daughters understands responsibility." I could have wired $10,000 across the table while she said it, and it still wouldn't have changed the sentence. One memory tells you everything. A few years earlier, Bridget moved back home to save money. My mother charged her nothing. No rent, no utilities, no grocery contribution, nothing. I came by for Christmas dinner and got asked, before dessert, whether I was planning to help cover food since I had no children and less real responsibility. My father tried to say something. He always did, a little too softly. "Elaine, that's enough." And my mother shut him down the way she always did. Quick, clean, public enough to make pushing back feel embarrassing. I moved out for good at 22 after I landed my first major tech job. Best decision I ever made. After that, I kept my relationship with my mother as limited as I could without cutting my father out too. I still saw him regularly, lunch sometimes, coffee when I was in the area, quiet little stretches of conversation about weather, traffic, football, broken appliances, things neither of us really cared about, but both understood were code for "I'm still here." Then January 2024 happened. My father was diagnosed with stage 3 pancreatic cancer. There are moments in life that split everything into before and after, and that was one of them. The oncologist didn't dress it up. Aggressive chemo every 2 weeks, constant labs, medication management, weekly monitoring of his CA 19-9 levels, 12 rounds of treatment if he tolerated them. Maybe a Whipple procedure later if the tumor responded. Maybe. That word sat in my chest like ice. Maybe the treatment would buy him time. Maybe his body would hold. Maybe we'd get lucky. But there was no maybe about the logistics. They were brutal. Appointments stacked on appointments. Insurance approvals. Pharmacy calls. Infusion schedules. Side effect tracking. Temperature monitoring. Pain management. Hydration. Food. Sleep. Timing. Documentation. Every mistake mattered. Every delay could become its own kind of danger. My mother called me crying the night the treatment plan was confirmed. "Your father needs you," she said. "Please come home." I didn't say yes immediately. That mattered to me then, and it still does now. I asked about other options first: a home health aide, a rotating schedule with Bridget, part-time care support, paid help for the heavier days, something sustainable, something structured, something that didn't require me moving back into the house where I'd spent years being treated like a tolerated failure. My mother rejected all of it almost instantly. Family takes care of family. What she meant was, family should provide free labor I can supervise. But my father was sick, so I moved back in. I did it with one condition. I said it in the kitchen the day I brought my overnight bags in. Calm, direct, looking at both of them, not just her. "I'm here for Dad," I said, "not for family politics." My father gave me this tired little nod, like he was grateful I'd said it out loud. My mother smiled the way people do when they've already decided your boundaries are decorative. Bridget, of course, did not move in. She stayed at her apartment, visited maybe once a month, brought coffee no one asked for, took photos in waiting rooms, and posted captions about fighting this together. Together. That word almost made me laugh every time I saw it. Because while she was collecting soft-angle evidence of devotion, I was the one doing the real work. I managed the medication schedule. I handled insurance calls. I coordinated with the oncology office. I drove him to appointments, tracked side effects, picked up prescriptions, dealt with prior authorizations, monitored refill windows, and kept a backup go bag in my car with his insurance cards, medication list, emergency contacts, and copies of his records. That's the thing about serious illness people don't understand until they live inside it. The patient isn't the only one carrying it. There's always someone behind the scenes making sure the machine doesn't break. That was me, every day. And because my work was remote, I was also running my company in the spaces between all of it. Early mornings, late nights, laptop open at the kitchen island. Reports written while infusion pumps dripped poison into my father's veins to save his life. Calls taken from parking lots. Security audits reviewed in waiting rooms. Contracts handled quietly while everyone around me assumed I was doing nothing because I wasn't leaving for an office in sensible shoes. To my mother, all of that was sitting around the house. 2 weeks after I moved in, she cornered me in the kitchen while my father was asleep upstairs. I was halfway through a security audit report for a credit union in Dallas. Laptop open, notes spread out, coffee gone cold. She leaned against the counter and folded her arms. "Since you're doing so well with your little computer thing," she said, "you can help keep this house afloat." I didn't look up right away. That annoyed her. "Medical bills are piling up," she continued. "You're here anyway. How much do you make?" I lifted my eyes from the screen. "My father's care is being handled." "That's not what I asked." Her voice had that brittle sharpness it got when she wasn't getting immediate compliance. "How much do you make, Caroline? What's in your savings? Do you even have savings? You got real cash flow, or are you just pretending again?" I sat back slowly in the chair. "You are not auditing my life." Her jaw tightened. "You are a grown woman living under my roof. I moved back here to manage Dad's care. And if you're doing as well as you claim, prove it." There it was. Not concern. Not collaboration. Proof. Submission. Documentation she could hold in her hand and feel powerful over. I went back to my screen. Drop it. For a second, the room was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator motor kick on. Then she made this small, disbelieving sound, like I had violated the natural order of the universe by refusing to explain myself. What she didn't know was that I already had a spreadsheet. Every provider, every payment, every confirmation number, every copay, every lab fee, every prescription. PDFs saved. Backups in cloud storage. Encrypted copies on external drives. Date-stamped receipts filed by category. And what she really didn't know was that I had already paid close to $50,000 toward my father's care over the past several months. Directly to providers. Quietly. My father knew. My mother didn't. He'd been depositing my transfers and telling her insurance had covered more than expected because somewhere deep down, I think he already understood that if she knew how much I was paying, she would stop seeing his illness as a crisis and start seeing it as an opening. 2 days before everything truly blew apart, I took my father to one of his oncology appointments. My mother insisted on coming. That should have warned me how bad the day was going to get. From the moment we got there, she was impossible. Complaining about the wait, complaining about the chairs, complaining that no one respected spouses anymore, complaining that the front desk girl had an attitude because she'd politely asked her not to stand in the doorway. When the nurse called my father's name, my mother pushed herself up and moved like she was walking into a board meeting she planned to dominate. Inside the exam room, she interrupted constantly. The oncologist, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with the exact kind of patience serious medicine requires, was explaining scan results and treatment timing when my mother cut across her to ask whether the next infusion could be moved because it interfered with Bridget's birthday dinner. Not because my father was too weak, not because of a medical issue, because of dinner. I remember staring at her for a second, not fully believing I'd heard that sentence correctly. My father looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with chemo. The doctor kept trying to redirect. My mother kept talking over her. At one point, I actually stepped between them, not aggressively, just enough to break the line of fire, and said, "Can we focus on the cancer for 5 minutes?" The room went still. My mother shot me a look full of venom. The doctor finished the appointment professionally, but after we stepped into the hallway, she pulled me aside. Her voice was low. "Your mother cannot be in exam rooms anymore." I held her gaze. "Good, I need that documented." She nodded once. "Your father's stress spikes when she's present. It affects treatment compliance, and frankly, she is interfering with care. I'm adding a note to the chart and asking patient advocacy to flag it." I felt something cold and clear settle into place inside me. "Thank you." That was the moment the story in my head changed. Up until then, I'd still been operating under the idea that my mother was difficult, selfish, emotionally exhausting, maybe even manipulative. But this was different. This was a medical professional looking me in the eye and confirming that my mother's presence was making my father's treatment harder. Not emotionally harder, clinically harder. That night, after I'd already rescheduled follow-ups, confirmed pharmacy delivery, and paid another office balance directly, my mother made a Facebook post. "Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight almost alone, trusting God's plan even when others don't understand the sacrifice." 43 likes, 12 comments. Bridget replied, "You're so strong, Mom. We don't deserve you." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I took a screenshot, saved it with the date, and created a folder on my laptop called Documentation. I didn't comment. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just started building a file. Because when someone is committed to lying about you, the worst thing you can do is keep trying to win in real time. You let them talk. You let them get comfortable. You let them believe performance is protection. Then you save everything. And a few days later, I found the first piece of proof that made the entire shape of my mother's behavior click into something far uglier than I wanted to admit. I was sitting at the dining room table, organizing my father's weekly pill case, when his phone buzzed beside me. He'd fallen asleep in the recliner. Normally, I wouldn't have touched it, but with oncology offices, specialty pharmacies, and insurance departments calling from numbers that change constantly, I checked the screen just to make sure it wasn't urgent. It wasn't the clinic. It was a bank alert. Login attempt from new device. My stomach tightened. I woke my father gently. "Dad," I said, "did you just try to log into your bank account?" He blinked at me, groggy and confused. "No, why?" I showed him the screen, and I watched the color drain from his face. For a second, he just stared. Then he said quietly, "Your mother asked for my password last week." I went very still. "What did she say?" "She said she needed to make sure insurance payments were going through." His voice sounded smaller than I'd heard it in years. I told her no. There are moments when anger doesn't come in hot. It comes in cold. Precise. Useful. I picked up the phone again. "Okay," I said. "We're changing everything tonight." My father was still sitting in the recliner when I brought my laptop over and pulled up every account I could think of. Banking first, then insurance, then Medicare, then Social Security, then the patient portal. Anything tied to his identity, his money, his treatment, or his records. I changed every password, turned on two-factor authentication, linked recovery options to my phone and email, and installed a password manager so he wouldn't have to keep pretending he could remember 15 complicated logins while his body was being flooded with poison every other week. He watched me work in silence for a while. Finally, he said, "I didn't think she'd actually try." I didn't answer right away, because the truth was I had started to think exactly that. Not because I wanted to, because I had seen enough. I took screenshots of the alert, the timestamp, the device notification, everything. Saved them in the documentation folder under a new subfolder, Financial Access Attempts. Then I looked at him and said as gently as I could, "From now on, if Mom puts anything in front of you to sign or asks for any account information, you tell me first." He nodded. There was shame in his face, but not because he'd done anything wrong. It was the shame of realizing someone you built a life with might be treating your illness like an opportunity. That look stayed with me. 2 days later, it got worse. I was upstairs on a work call with a client when I heard raised voices from the kitchen. Not loud at first. Not the kind of explosion that makes you run. More like pressure building inside a sealed room. Then I heard my father say my name. I muted myself, apologized to the client, and went downstairs. My mother was standing beside the kitchen table with a sheet of paper in her hand, pushing it toward him while he sat there looking pale and overwhelmed. "Just sign it," she said. "It's for the medical bills. I need authorization to talk to billing." I crossed the room and took the paper out of her hand before she could stop me. And there it was. Not a billing authorization. Not a narrow release form. A broad financial power of attorney. Permanent. Pre-filled. His name, his address, his social security number already typed in. Everything ready except the signature at the bottom. My heartbeat didn't speed up. It slowed. That was the scary part. "He's not signing this," I said. My mother's head snapped toward me. "Mind your business." This became my business the second you tried to slide legal control of his finances in front of a cancer patient and call it paperwork. Her face changed immediately, twisting with rage. "This is between me and my husband." I looked at my father. "Did you ask for this?" He shook his head. My mother stepped closer, voice rising. "He needs help. I'm his wife. I should be the one handling these things." "No," I said, still holding the paper. "You want to be the one controlling these things." She made a sound like I had insulted God in her kitchen. "You are poisoning him against me." That line almost would have worked if not for the document in my hand. I set it flat on the counter and took photos of every page. My mother lunged like she was going to grab it back. I moved it out of reach. "Don't," I said quietly. That stopped her more than yelling would have. She turned to my father, expecting him to fix it, to restore the old balance where she spoke and everyone else adjusted around her. Instead, he said weak but clear, "Stop." The room froze. My mother stared at him. He swallowed once and said, "Garrett." Then he stopped himself, exhausted, and corrected, "Caroline is handling things." It hit me then, the strange ache of hearing him almost reach for the old shape of the story, before correcting himself toward the present, not because he didn't know who I was, because in crises, people sometimes reach for habit first. But he corrected it. He chose me. My mother looked at him as if betrayal had just climbed out of his mouth wearing my face. I folded the document and slipped it into my folder. "From now on," I said to my father, "don't sign anything she gives you unless I've reviewed it." My mother's face went blotchy with fury. "You think a few errands and fake emails make you his caregiver?" "No," I said. "The fact that I'm the one keeping him alive does." I went back upstairs and finished my client call with my pulse steady and my jaw locked so hard it hurt. When the call ended, I added a new section to the documentation folder. Attempted power of attorney. Photographs. Timestamp. Notes. Summary of the exchange while it was still fresh. That same week, my mother crossed a line that erased any last instinct I had to keep seeing this as a family conflict. She canceled one of my father's chemo infusions. I found out in the lobby. We had arrived early that morning because his neuropathy had been worse, and I wanted time to talk to the nurse before pre-med started. He was tired, nauseated, and shivering lightly. From the over-air-conditioned clinic, the way patients always do, in places built more for machines than comfort. I checked him in. The receptionist frowned at the screen, then frowned harder. "I'm sorry," she said. "This infusion was canceled 2 days ago." I stared at her. "What?" She clicked around, clearly uncomfortable. "It says someone called to reschedule for next month." Next month! For people who have never sat inside a chemo calendar, that might not sound catastrophic. For pancreatic cancer, for this protocol, for this stage, it was insane. The oncologist had been very clear. Timing mattered. Spacing mattered. You don't casually bump treatment because something social came up. "Who canceled it?" I asked. The receptionist hesitated. "It says the caller identified herself as his wife." My father turned to look at me, and I felt something inside me go completely cold. "Can you pull the notes?" I asked. She nodded and started scrolling. The caller knew his date of birth, address, and said there was a family conflict. The staff member noted she was insistent. Insistent. That was such a polite word for sabotage. I pulled out my phone and called my mother right there in the clinic lobby. She picked up on the second ring. "What? Did you cancel Dad's infusion?" A pause. Then, in the same irritated tone someone might use to explain why they moved a lunch reservation, she said, "It was too close to Bridget's birthday dinner." For a second, I thought I had misheard her. I turned away from the front desk because I needed a wall at my back to keep from saying something irreversible. "You canceled chemotherapy," I said slowly, "for a birthday dinner?" "He needed to be there for family," she snapped. "1 week isn't going to kill him." I closed my eyes. The cancer does not pause because Bridget wants cake. You are so dramatic. No, I said, and my voice came out low and razor thin. You could have killed him. I hung up before she could answer. Then I turned back to the receptionist. I need the patient advocate, now. And I need this documented in his chart as unauthorized interference with treatment. The clinic manager came out within minutes. I explained everything once, clearly. No theatrics, no rambling, just facts. My father sat beside me, pale and humiliated, hearing strangers talk about his wife like she was a threat to his treatment because she was. The manager reviewed the notes, pulled the phone log, and then did something that told me how serious this had become. She retrieved the call recording. We listened to it. My mother's voice was unmistakable, controlled, confident, self-righteous, demanding that the appointment be moved because family obligations came first, and the office needed to respect a wife's authority. I looked at my father while it played. He stared at the floor. When it ended, the manager said, "We're rescheduling him immediately." Then she lowered her voice and added, "This is a patient safety issue." The phrase landed hard, because that was the truth stripped of family language. Not a misunderstanding, not a disagreement, not stress. A patient safety issue. The clinic locked his scheduling profile so only my father or I could make changes. They flagged my mother's number system-wide, added notes for nursing staff, added notes for front desk, added notes for advocacy. I requested a printed incident report. They gave me one. I folded it carefully and slid it into my bag. By the time we got to the car, my father looked 20 years older than he had that morning. I got him settled in the passenger seat, shut the door, and stood there for a few seconds with one hand on the roof of the car. The sun was too bright. The parking garage smelled like hot concrete and engine oil. My reflection in the window looked calmer than I felt, which was probably for the best. When I got into the driver's seat, my father said, very quietly, "I didn't know she'd do that." I started the engine, but didn't pull out yet. "Dad," I said, "you need to stop giving her the benefit of the doubt. She tried to get into your bank account. She tried to get you to sign power of attorney. She just canceled life-saving treatment for a birthday dinner." His face folded in on itself for a second. Not crying. Worse. The expression of someone watching the last story they've told themselves collapse in real time. "I know," he said. We drove home in silence. That night I showed him everything. Not just the clinic report. Everything. The bank alert screenshots. The notes from the attempted password access. The photographs of the power of attorney form. The incident report from the oncology office. The growing sequence of Facebook martyr posts. My own spreadsheet of payments I had made directly toward his care. The voicemails. The dates. The patterns. All of it organized, labeled, time-stamped, impossible to wave away as emotion. I spread it across the dining room table the way prosecutors lay out evidence in crime shows. Only this wasn't television. This was my life. My father sat there with both hands wrapped around a mug of tea he had forgotten to drink. He read slowly. Sometimes he would stop and stare at a page for so long I thought he'd lost the line. Finally, he looked up at me. His hands were shaking. Not from chemo. From grief. "She's not trying to help me," he said. It wasn't a question. "No," I said. "She's trying to control your care, your money, and your access to everyone around you, and she's willing to hurt you to keep that control." He closed his eyes for a second. Then he opened them and said the sentence that changed everything. "From now on, you handle it." I didn't move. He kept going. Medical, financial, scheduling, all of it. If anyone has questions, they talk to you. There are moments when relief doesn't feel warm. It feels devastating, because it means the thing you were afraid was true has finally been said out loud. The next day, I took him back to the oncology office. We met with the doctor after labs. He spoke before I had to. "Doctor," he said, voice thin but steady, "going forward, my daughter runs the show. Any questions about treatment, scheduling, medications, billing, any of it, you talk to Caroline." The oncologist looked at him carefully, then nodded. "All right." We completed everything that mattered. HIPAA authorization, healthcare proxy, witness signatures, notarized copies. The doctor documented that he was fully competent and making the decision clearly, voluntarily, and without coercion. She also added a note stating that ongoing family conflict had already negatively affected treatment adherence. I got copies for myself, one for his chart, one for him, one scanned into secure storage before we even left the parking lot. By the time we got home, my mother was already waiting in the kitchen. I think she knew. Maybe from the way the clinic stopped taking her calls. Maybe from the silence where compliance used to be. Maybe because people like her can smell control leaving the room. Her face was tight and hot with rage. "What did you do?" she asked. My father walked past her and sat down without answering. "So I did. He chose me as his healthcare proxy. Her expression changed so fast it almost looked like fear before it hardened back into fury. You manipulated him. No, I said. You forced him to protect himself. She turned to him. Tell her this isn't true. He didn't. He just sat there, tired and quiet, refusing to rescue her from the consequences of her own behavior. And that, more than anything, was what broke the balance of the house. She looked back at me with something wild in her eyes. You think you've won something? I met her stare. No, I said, I think you just lost access. That was the word that made her flinch. Access. Because that was always what this had been. Not devotion. Not concern. Access to his care. Access to his information. Access to his money. Access to the stories she got to tell other people about herself. For the rest of that evening, she moved through the house like a storm searching for somewhere to land. Cabinets slammed. Doors shut too hard. Her voice kept rising in little bursts from the other room while she talked to Bridget on speakerphone, spinning the first draft of a new victim narrative. I didn't listen closely. I didn't need to. I knew the shape of it already. Unstable daughter, ungrateful daughter, controlling daughter, poor suffering wife, poor devoted sister, family under attack. I stayed at the dining table with my father's paperwork spread neatly in front of me and scanned every signed page into 3 separate backups. Then I made a new folder. Medical authority, active. Because once you understand someone is willing to interfere with cancer treatment to keep control, you stop hoping they'll calm down. You prepare for retaliation. And I was right to, because after the paperwork was signed, my mother stopped pretending she wanted cooperation. What she wanted now was punishment. The explosion came 2 days later. Not out of nowhere. Nothing with my mother ever came out of nowhere. It built. Pressure. Silence. Little sharp comments thrown like needles into passing moments. The sound of cabinets closing, just a little too hard. The way she stopped speaking directly to me and started speaking around me, as if I were already something she had decided to remove. That morning, the house felt wrong before anything even happened. My father was upstairs resting after a rough night. I was at the kitchen table, laptop open, reviewing a penetration test report while keeping one eye on the medication schedule I'd set alarms for every 3 hours. My mother walked in, stood there for a second, then pulled out a chair and sat across from me. No greeting, no build-up. Just straight into it. You think you're special now? I didn't look up immediately. That always bothered her more than anything. Her voice sharpened. You think clicking buttons on a computer while your father suffers makes you better than people who actually work? There it was. The same line she'd been repeating since I was 19. Different words, same accusation. I closed my laptop slowly. Say what you want to say. She leaned forward, eyes bright with anger, spit catching at the edges of her words. I let you move back into this house. I gave you a roof, and you can't even get a real job to help with your father's medical bills? My father's voice floated weakly from the hallway. Elaine, please. Be quiet, she snapped, without even turning her head. I'm talking to her. Then back to me. You are an embarrassment. I'm done pretending you're going to amount to anything. If this had been 2 weeks earlier, that would have hurt. It would have landed somewhere soft and old inside me. But something had shifted. Now it just registered. Filed. Another data point. You've got 1 week, she continued. 1 week to show me proof of employment at a real job. Manufacturing, warehouse, something with a time clock, something with pay stubs I can verify. There it was again. Verification. Control. Paper she could hold. Evidence she could twist. I felt something settle into place inside my chest. Not anger. Clarity. No, I said. She blinked. No? You're not getting pay stubs. And you're not touching his care. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor as she stood. You don't get to make that decision. I already did. Her face flushed deep red. Then get out. The words hung in the air for half a second. And then she said them again, louder. Get out of my house. Behind her, my father had made it to the edge of the hallway, one hand braced against the wall. Stop, he said, but his voice was too thin to cut through what she had already decided. She pointed toward the front door. I am not going to support a useless adult who refuses to contribute. You want to play caregiver? Do it somewhere else. I stood up slowly. The kitchen felt very small all of a sudden. Same scratched laminate table I'd done homework on as a kid. Same cheap chairs that squeaked when you shifted your weight. Same fluorescent light overhead that buzzed like it had been waiting its entire life for this moment. I looked at my father, not at her. Dad, I said, calm and steady, we're leaving tonight. My mother laughed. A sharp, disbelieving sound. What? Pack what you need. Medications first. You can't just... I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on him. Are you coming with me? There are moments where everything pauses. where the entire future balances on one answer. My father didn't hesitate. He nodded. I'm coming with you. The sound my mother made then wasn't anger. It was panic. You're not taking him anywhere, she shouted. This is my house. He's my husband. I turned to her for the first time. Your house? She faltered, just for a second. My house, she repeated, but it came out thinner. Dad bought this place in 1998, I said. Your name's not on the deed. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. You can't. We're leaving, I said, already moving toward the stairs. Dad, I'm grabbing your meds. She followed me, voice rising behind me, words tumbling over each other. You ungrateful girl. After everything I've done, you can't do this. He's my... She stopped. Mid-sentence. I turned slowly. You're what? I asked. Her face went blank. Too blank. You're taking away my husband, she said quickly. But we both knew that wasn't what she had almost said. I held her gaze for a second longer than necessary. Then I turned away. Because I didn't need confirmation anymore. I already had it. Upstairs I moved fast. Not frantic. Efficient. There's a difference. I packed his medications first, organizing them into a cooler bag with ice packs for the temperature-sensitive ones, pulled his oxygen concentrator from the corner, grabbed the portable tank, blood pressure cuff, thermometer, his medical folder, insurance cards, backup prescriptions. Clothes went into a duffel. I added his favorite pillow without thinking. Hospital pillows were terrible, and sleep mattered. Every detail mattered. Behind me, I could hear my mother moving through the house, narrating loudly to no one, building her version of the story in real time. She's stealing him. She's always been like this. Selfish, unstable. My father sat on the edge of the bed while I packed, watching, quiet. But there was something in his face I hadn't seen in months. Relief. Like he had been holding his breath inside this house and had finally been given permission to exhale. It took me 40 minutes. 40 minutes to dismantle everything necessary to keep him alive and portable. By the time I helped him down the stairs, my mother had positioned herself near the front door like she could physically block reality from happening. You walk out that door, she said, voice shaking, and don't come back. I didn't respond. I opened the door. The porch light was still on, even though it was daylight. I guided my father carefully down the steps and into my car. My Audi A5, fully paid off. Quiet engine, clean interior. Everything about it, something my mother would have called unnecessary. I got him settled, seat adjusted, blanket across his lap, oxygen secured. Then I closed the door. When I turned back, she was standing in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, eyes burning. This isn't over, she said. No, I agreed. It's not. And then I got in this car and drove away. My condo was downtown, 27th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. Not cheap, not flashy, just mine. My mother had no idea it existed the way it did. She thought I slept in their guest room full time. Probably imagined I had roommates. Probably imagined I barely got by. I didn't correct her. I never corrected her. Because correcting her never changed anything. Reality didn't matter to her. Narrative did. I helped my father inside, got him settled on the couch, water within reach, medications lined up. Stay here, I said. Rest. I'm going back for the rest of your things. He nodded, then caught my wrist lightly. Be careful, he said. With your mother? I gave him a small smile. I know. And I did. That's why I had already started documenting everything. That night she called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Caroline, it's your mother. You kidnapped your father. I'm calling the police. You stole him from his home. He needs me, not some selfish child playing house. Bring him back immediately, or there will be consequences. We need to talk about money and your father's care. I saved it. Time-stamped. Filed. No response. The next morning, Bridget texted. Bridget, Mom's been calling me nonstop and crying. What did you do? I looked at the message for a second, then typed back. Me. I took Dad with me. She kicked me out. He chose to come. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, Bridget, you can't just take him. I exhaled slowly. Me. He's not an object. Bridget. He needs his wife, not his loser daughter who can't even hold a real job. I stared at the screen. It was almost impressive how perfectly she echoed our mother. Same words, same tone, same certainty. I took a screenshot, saved it. No argument. No explanation. Just documentation. That afternoon, the oncology office called. The nurse sounded stressed. Caroline, your mother has called 3 times this morning demanding to know where your father is. She's threatening to report us for patient abandonment. I leaned back in my chair, already opening my notes. He's with me. He chose to leave. I have his HIPAA authorization and healthcare proxy. She has no legal authority. We understand, the nurse said quickly. We just needed to clarify for documentation. She was very aggressive. Document everything she says, I said. Every threat, every accusation. There was a brief pause. Then the nurse lowered her voice slightly. We already have been. The social worker flagged her weeks ago. This latest call, asking about financial details she doesn't have authorization for, that's concerning. Good. It wasn't just me seeing it anymore. Can you add a hard block? I asked. No information to anyone except me or my father. Already done. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Thank you. When the call ended, I added another section to the folder. Medical harassment ongoing. Because that's what it was now. Not conflict. Harassment. Over the next 2 weeks, my mother escalated. Not directly to me. Not at first. Publicly. Facebook posts about sacrifice. About ungrateful children. About fighting alone. Church friends filling in the comments with sympathy and outrage. People who had never seen a single oncology report in their lives demanding I be arrested for kidnapping. I didn't respond. I didn't post. I didn't defend myself. I just watched. And saved everything. Because the louder she got, the more evidence she created. Then she crossed into something else entirely. I was in the middle of reviewing a client report when a new email came through. Subject line, professional concern. I opened it. Read it once, then read it again. To whom it may concern, I am writing to inform you that Caroline Mercer, who claims to work for your company, has kidnapped her dying father and is currently holding him against his will. It went on. Accusations, lies, claims that I was unstable, dangerous, a risk to any organization I represented. I sat there for a second, very still, because this wasn't just family anymore. This was business, reputation, income, everything I had built. I forwarded the email to my lawyer. No explanation, just one line. Add this to the file. He replied in under 10 minutes. This is actionable. Defamation, harassment, interference with business relationships. I'm drafting a cease and desist now. I leaned back in my chair and looked out at the city through the glass. The skyline was calm, unbothered, unaware. Inside my apartment, my father was sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks. And somewhere across the city, my mother was escalating faster than she realized, which was perfect, because I wasn't reacting. I was building a case. And the more she pushed, the stronger it became. 4 days after I moved my father out, my mother called the police. Not as a bluff, not as a threat. She actually did it. I was in the kitchen making coffee when there was a knock at the door. Firm, official, the kind that carries authority even before you open it. I already knew. I checked the camera first. 2 officers. Neutral posture, not aggressive, not casual either. Procedure. I opened the door. Morning, I said. Ma'am, the older officer nodded. We received a call regarding a potential vulnerable adult situation. Your mother claims you removed your father from his home without consent. I stepped back and opened the door wider. Come in. No hesitation. No defensiveness. Because the truth doesn't need staging. My father was on the couch, oxygen line in place, medications organized neatly on the table beside him, blanket across his lap, television muted. He looked up as they entered. The younger officer did a quick visual sweep, the kind they're trained to do. Environment, condition, orientation. Everything in order. The older officer stepped closer. Sir, he said gently, we just need to confirm. Are you here of your own free will? My father didn't even look at me. I am, he said. I left voluntarily. Were you coerced or forced in any way? No. Do you wish to remain here? Yes. His voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. Not once. Then he added something I hadn't expected. My wife was interfering with my medical treatment. I came here because my daughter is taking proper care of me. The room went still for a second. That wasn't just confirmation. That was context. The older officer nodded slowly, then turned to me. Do you have documentation showing you're authorized to manage his care? I already had it in my hand. HIPAA authorization. Healthcare proxy. Signed, dated, witnessed, notarized. He looked through the first page, then handed it to his partner. This looks legitimate. It is, I said. He nodded again. We'll document that he's here voluntarily and that you have proper authorization. If your mother calls again, we'll reference this report. I took the card he handed me. Case number visible. Officer names. Date. Time. Another piece of evidence. Thank you, I said. When they left, the apartment felt quieter than it had before they arrived. Not because of the silence, because something had been confirmed. Officially. Legally. This wasn't her story anymore. I called my lawyer immediately. She filed a police report, I said. And? He asked. They came, verified everything, documented that he's here voluntarily. Good, he said. That helps us. That's not enough, I replied. I want a protective order. There was a brief pause. Walk me through everything you have so far. I did. The voicemails, the bank login attempt, the power of attorney, the canceled chemo, the harassment calls to the clinic, the defamatory email to my business, the police report. When I finished, he didn't hesitate. That's more than enough, he said. We'll file tomorrow. When's the hearing? 2 weeks, give or take. Good. One more thing, he added. Your father needs to either appear or provide a written statement. The judge will want to hear from him directly. He'll be there. I didn't even need to ask. The next few days were quiet on the surface, loud underneath. My mother doubled down online. Long posts about betrayal, about losing everything, about a daughter who chose money over family. People commented, shared, speculated. I didn't respond, didn't engage, didn't defend, because I didn't need to. Not anymore. Instead, I sent one message to my aunt, then my uncle, then 2 cousins. Simple, clear, no emotion. Restraining order hearing, April 12th, 2 p.m., Courtroom 4B, Travis County Family Court. Public record. If you want the truth, come see it. That was it. No persuasion, no explanation, just an invitation. Because the truth doesn't need convincing. It just needs to be seen. 2 days later, my father and I went to see an attorney. Not for drama, for structure. Because illness doesn't wait for family disputes to settle. And I wasn't going to let anything be left exposed. We sat in that office for nearly 2 hours. Paperwork stacked in front of us. Signatures, witnesses, notarization stamps, legal language that turned intention into protection. My father updated everything. His will, his beneficiaries, his accounts. Then he looked at the attorney and said something that shifted the ground under everything that came next. I want her on the deed. The attorney looked up. Joint ownership with survivorship? Yes. I didn't speak, didn't interrupt, because I understood exactly what that meant. Not just practically, emotionally. Trust, formalized. Protection, enforced. The paperwork was drawn up immediately. We signed, filed it that same afternoon. Just like that, I wasn't just managing his care. I was legally tied to the one asset my mother had been acting like she controlled for decades, and she had no idea. The morning of the hearing, I woke up early. Not because I was nervous, because I wanted everything perfect. My lawyer had prepared 3 binders. Clean, organized, tabbed, each section labeled, each claim backed by evidence, medical interference, financial misconduct, harassment, false reporting, third-party documentation, every page numbered, every timeline clear. I didn't need drama. I had documentation. We arrived 30 minutes early. Got my father settled in the front row. Oxygen tank beside him. Water within reach. He looked tired, but calm. At 1:50 p.m., my aunt walked in. Then my uncle. Then my cousins. They sat quietly in the back, watching. At 1:55, my mother arrived. With Bridget, and a lawyer who looked like he had been hired 3 days ago. She saw me first. Her face flushed red. Then she saw my father, and it drained completely. Then she saw the rest of the family sitting behind us, and something in her expression broke. She hadn't expected witnesses. All rise? The judge entered. Older woman, sharp eyes. No patience for theatrics. She looked down at the file. Petition for protective order based on harassment, medical interference, and false police reporting. Then she looked at my mother. You're the respondent? Yes, Your Honor. This is a misunderstanding. We'll get to that. Then she turned to my father. And you're the patient? Yes, ma'am. Good, let's begin. My lawyer stood, calm, precise. Your Honor, the respondent filed a false police report claiming her daughter kidnapped her husband. The patient left voluntarily, which is documented in the responding officer's report. He handed over Exhibit A. The respondent also interfered with medical treatment, including canceling a scheduled chemotherapy infusion without consent. The judge looked up. She canceled chemo? Yes, Your Honor. He handed over the clinic report. Then the call recording transcript. Then the notes from the oncology office documenting behavioral interference. The judge's expression hardened. Continue. She also attempted to gain unauthorized financial control through a pre-filled power of attorney and made repeated attempts to access the patient's bank accounts. Exhibits, photos, timestamps. She sent defamatory communications to the petitioner's business, attempting to damage her professional standing. The email, printed, highlighted. And finally, Your Honor, he paused, then set down a stack of receipts. The petitioner has personally paid approximately $50,000 toward her father's medical care over the past 6 months, while the respondent publicly claims she contributed nothing. Silence. Heavy. Complete. The judge looked at my mother. Your daughter paid $50,000 for your husband's care, and you called her useless? My mother opened her mouth, closed it. I didn't know. Because you weren't authorized to know, the judge said flatly. Then she turned to my father. Sir, tell me what happened. He stood slowly, walked to the witness stand with his oxygen tank. Every step deliberate. I have stage 3 pancreatic cancer, he said. My daughter moved in and managed everything. My wife interfered. She canceled my treatment. She caused stress that made everything worse. He paused, looked directly at the judge. When she told my daughter to leave, I chose to go with her. No hesitation, no confusion, just truth. I'm still choosing that. The judge nodded once. Thank you. Then she turned back to my mother. Do you have anything to say? Tears. Immediate. Practiced. I just want my husband back, she said. I'm his wife. He is competent, the judge cut in. He chooses. That was it. That was the end of her argument. The judge closed the file. Based on the evidence, false police reporting, medical interference, harassment, and defamation, I am granting the protective order. My mother made a choking sound. Effective immediately, the judge continued. 12 months, no contact, direct or indirect, no social media references, no contact with her workplace or medical providers. She signed the order. The sound of the pen on paper was louder than anything that had been said. This hearing is concluded. The gavel didn't need to hit. It was already done. In the hallway, my aunt approached me slowly. Her face looked different, like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. I had no idea, she said. I nodded. I know. Why didn't you tell us? I held her gaze. Would you have believed me? She didn't answer, because we both knew the truth. Behind us, my mother stepped out of the courtroom. She looked at me, opened her mouth. I raised my hand slightly. Don't, I said. The order is already active. She froze, then turned, and walked away. For the first time in months, my phone stayed quiet. And for the first time in years, the story about me was finally the truth. The house was the last piece. Everything else had already been handled. Medical care secured. Legal authority established. Protective order granted. But my mother and Bridget were still living in that house like none of it applied to them. Like reality was optional. Like paperwork didn't exist if you ignored it long enough. That was their pattern. Ignore. Perform. Delay. Hope something shifts back in their favor. It wasn't going to. I had my lawyer draft the notice to vacate. Formal. Precise. 30 days. Both their names on it. Delivered 2 ways. Certified mail and process server. Documented. Time-stamped. No room for interpretation. The message was simple. You have until May 15th to leave, or the court would do it for you. They ignored it. Of course they did. Instead, my mother escalated online. Posts about being forced out of her home. About losing everything. About a daughter consumed by greed. Bridget followed her lead, crying selfies, captions about betrayal, hashtags about family. I didn't respond, didn't comment, didn't defend. I just kept saving everything, because every post wasn't just noise anymore. It was evidence. May 15th came and went. They were still there. So the next morning, I filed for eviction. Filing fee. Paperwork. Court date set. May 28th. The hearing was faster than the last one. Cleaner. Because this wasn't emotional. It was property. The judge reviewed the deed. My father's name. My name. Joint ownership. Then the notice. Then proof of delivery. Then the timeline. She didn't look at my mother when she spoke. This property is legally owned by the petitioner and her father. The respondents have no legal claim to occupancy. The notice period has expired. She flipped the page. Eviction granted. That was it. No speeches. No sympathy. Just law. They left before the deadline. No announcement. No goodbye. Just gone. Like people who finally realized the story they'd been telling no longer had a place to live. On May 31st, I changed the locks. New deadbolts. New codes. New keys. I stood in the doorway for a moment after the locksmith left. The house felt different. Quiet. Not tense quiet. Not the kind where something is about to happen. Real quiet. Like the absence of noise that shouldn't have been there in the first place. I drove my father over later that afternoon. He moved slowly through the house, touching things. Walls. Furniture. Like he was reacquainting himself with a life that had been taken over without him realizing it. It's mine again, he said quietly. I shook my head. Ours. He smiled faintly, then sat down in his old recliner. And for the first time in months, he looked at peace. 3 days later, the first crack showed up at my door. I was making breakfast when the bell rang. I checked the camera. Bridget. She looked different. Not polished. Not composed. Tired. I opened the door. Didn't step aside. What? Her voice came out thin. Caroline, please. We're not doing this here. I don't have anywhere to go. I didn't react. I thought I could stay at the house until I figured things out. You were given 30 days. She swallowed. I can help with Dad? No. You can't just... I can. I held her gaze. You don't get to ignore everything, treat me like I'm nothing, and then show up asking for help when it's inconvenient for you. Tears filled her eyes. I'm your sister. And I was your sister when you called me useless. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Real. You'll figure it out, I said. Same way I did. Her mouth opened. Closed. Then she turned and walked away. No yelling. No scene. Just gone. The last time my mother showed up, it was at night. I was upstairs organizing my father's medications when I heard a car door slam. Checked the camera. Her. Standing outside the building. Arms crossed. Waiting. Not calling. Not knocking. Just standing. Like presence alone would force a response. I watched her for 10 minutes. Didn't move. Didn't go down. Didn't engage. Then she pulled out her phone. Mine buzzed. Unknown number. Mom, I'm outside. We need to talk. Screenshot. Saved. Another message. Mom, I know you see me. I'm not leaving. Screenshot. Saved. Then she walked up to the call box. Pressed my unit. The intercom buzzed. I let it record. Caroline, it's Mom. Her voice came through, softer now. Please, just 5 minutes. I can fix this. The house, the money. I'm sorry. Just let me up. I didn't answer. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer instead. She's here, I said. Texts, intercom, all recorded. Call non-emergency, he said. Report the violation. Do not engage. I didn't hesitate. I made the call. Gave them the case number. Explained everything. Stayed upstairs. Waited. 20 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. 2 officers. They approached her. She started talking immediately. Fast. Animated. Pointing at the building. I watched the whole thing through the camera. One of the officers pulled up the protective order on his tablet. Showed it to her. She kept talking. Then he pointed to his screen again. Her posture changed. Subtle, but visible. They spoke for a few more minutes, then handed her something. A warning. Documented. Official. She took it, crumpled slightly, then got in her car, and left. One of the officers called me after. We documented the violation, he said. She's been formally warned. Future contact could result in arrest. Thank you, I said. I sent them everything within minutes. Texts, audio, video, all time-stamped, all clean. That was the last time she showed up. No more messages, no more posts, no more calls. Just silence. Now it's just me and my father. His treatments happen on time. No one interferes. No one cancels anything for a dinner. No one demands proof of my life. The house is quiet. My phone is quiet. Everything is stable. And if there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's that some people don't see you as family. They see you as access. Access to money. Access to control. Access to a story that makes them look like the victim. And the moment you take that access away, they call it betrayal. But it's not. It's just the first time you stop letting them use you. She told me to go live in the streets. So I did something better. I walked out. Took everything that actually mattered with me and never gave her access again.